Hey, I'm Sandra. Today we're looking at making this EP booster. I'm going to show you how I did it myself. The EP booster is a pedal made by Exotic. This pedal simply increases your guitar's gain before reaching your amp and will boost up the volume, giving it a little bit more oomph. Let's start by taking a look at the materials you'll need. I purchased a majority of this stuff from the Tata website. This project is based off of one of the instructions found on their website. I will link this below. The heart of this pedal is based off of this EP booster PCB. You'll need to get one of these. I've listed all the resistors needed and their quantities on screen. Only metal film resistors should be used. You'll need two SPDT on-on switches, a 10K ohm potentiometer, one mono jack, one stereo jack, a DC jack, a 3PDT foot switch, a 1N4148 diode is needed, two 47 microfarad 50 volt capacitors, four 10 microfarad 50 volt capacitors. You'll also need a 100 microfarad 35 volt capacitor, a 47 nanofarad 100 volt capacitor, and a 3.3 nanofarad 100 volt capacitor. You'll also need a 2N5088 transistor, a J201 JFET SMD. I'll explain a little bit more about this later. Finally, you'll need a 9-volt clip as well as one LED. I simply followed the instructions provided by the Tata site. Like I said before, please see the link below. This site told me exactly where everything needed to be soldered to. Generally, when soldering a PCB, you want to work from the smaller components to the larger components. I started by soldering all of the resistors. Resistors don't have polarity and can be soldered in any direction. Once the resistors are all soldered, I then soldered the diode. Diodes do have polarity. The ring found on the one side indicates the cathode. The cathode is marked as a line on this PCB. I then soldered the two polyester capacitors. These capacitors don't have any polarity and can be soldered in any direction. The electrolytic capacitors, on the other hand, do have polarity. The negative side is indicated on the side of the capacitor, but the longer leg is generally the positive side. The next step was to solder the transistor. The flat side of the transistor is indicated on the PCB. Next, I soldered the potentiometer. The shaft of the potentiometer should be facing out from the PCB. Now originally, this project requires a J201 JFET transistor, but these have stopped being manufactured and are almost impossible to find. So to work around this, you can purchase the J201 JFET SMD. Now this can be very tricky to solder because it's so small, but just watch and learn. The next step to making this pedal can be seen in this diagram. If you simply follow this, you'll have something that looks like this. And finally, the two SPDT switches need to get soldered to the PCB. The next stage to this build is preparing the housing. I printed out my layout and taped it to the top of the case. This is to indicate where I need to drill out the holes. I then proceeded to drilling them out. From here, I printed out my design and laminated it using packing tape. From here, I applied it to some double-sided tape, cut it out, and stuck it to the housing. The final step was to assemble everything. Now unfortunately, I didn't plan any of this out ahead of time. Everything was super tight and the wires were everywhere. If you plan on making one of these, just keep in mind all of the components and plan accordingly. Once everything was assembled, I then closed up the case and the pedal was complete.